Yes. Hello, everybody. And thank you for joining us for our class. Oh, Kentucky is dreary today. That's where I am. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and it is gross. Um, but not inside where we get to talk books and reading. So thank you so much for joining us. We are so glad that you are here. So we have two big reasons for coming together today. First, we firmly believe that when you get more out of your reading life, you get more out of life. And we really want this to be your best reading year yet. It's no coincidence that we're doing this right at the beginning of the business of January, because you've got your whole reading year in front of you. And also, we want to give you a feel for what we do here. We know that a lot of people don't know, and we are so glad that you are here. Okay. Ginger, thank you for joining me today to do this. I'm really excited. Let me start by introducing myself. So, I am Anne Bogel. Some of you are here for the first time, as I can see. Oh, a lot of you are here for the first time. And today we're talking about reading mistakes, not because we want to be a big downer, but because when you put little like flashing warning tape by the pothole in the road, you can steer around it and not have that unpleasant cur thunk, because I'm sure that some of you experienced some cur thunks in your reading life in 2020. Um, I know I sure did. When we talk about the 7 common reading mistakes today, I have made every one of them multiple times over. The one I'd like to highlight is overwhelm, as I said yesterday on Instagram and on the blog when discussing the priority TBR, because it is a personality and professional hazard, both. But if you don't know me or if you haven't put a face to a voice, hi, I'm glad you're here. I This is what I do. So I talk about books and reading. I help people get more out of their reading lives. It is my job. And I do that with my podcast, What Should I Read Next? My blog, Modern Mrs. Darcy. This space we often use, this Zoom room is used most frequently by the Modern Mrs. Darcy Book Club. And then I also write books like I'd Rather Be Reading and Don't Overthink It. And I would like to introduce our community manager, Ginger Horton, who has been in that role for the book club since May 2016 when we kicked off.
Exciting. Hi, everyone. Like she said, I'm Ginger Horton, which just means the book club community manager just means that I get to hang out and talk books with all the wonderful book club members every day. I'm actually coming from you. I don't know who will want to hear this, but it might make you feel better. It is very dreary here in Hawaii today. It is rainy and cloudy, which is rare, but we'll take it. So I get to come on and talk books with you guys all day, and it's just a treat. So I hope that people get a little taste of what we do because I clearly love it. I always say I was a fangirl before I was a team member, which just means that I was a part of the book club before I was part of the Modern Mrs. Darcy team. So I love it and have loved it for a really long time. It's a great place to be.
We're so glad you're here. Ginger, are you ready to dive into common mistakes?
Yes.
All right, y'all, I'm going to share my screen. We have some slides. These slides are not going to be moving quickly. So you have plenty of time to jot down what you want to. Also, we will email you out the 7 common pitfalls in the follow-up email. So if you don't have pen and paper, if you're on the treadmill, if you're driving a car, well, can you drive a car and come to a class? Don't answer that. Because if you are, we don't want to know. Yes, you just keep your eyes on the road. But we will put the 7 common pitfalls in the email, and you can watch it later. So no worries on that front. So here's what we're doing today. We, as you see, are talking about the 7 common mistakes you may be making in your reading life. And y'all, seriously, being able to diagnose a problem that's been tripping you up is so helpful and positive. So I don't want the mistakes framing to trip you up. And really, what we're doing today is taking a few steps back and looking at our reading life as at a whole instead of book by book as we so often do, to look at some of the pitfalls we might have encountered in the past year or frequently encounter even now in our reading lives. So I'm sharing 7 common mistakes that I've encountered or that I've discussed with fellow readers, because y'all, that's my job. I started blogging about books in 2011. We started the podcast in 2016. I've talked to thousands of readers about what trips them up in their reading lives. And these are the ones that I hear most frequently from readers. And I will tell you right now, like I have made every mistake on this list. Maybe you have too. And I really don't want you to beat yourself up about that because they are easy to fall into and they're also easy to miss. These traps that we're discussing today are insidious. And it's so easy for us to not even realize that we're doing them or that they're affecting us. So as you're following along today, just ask yourself, does this apply to me? Have I ever done that? And just know that this is a safe space. to say, yes, that's me, or no, not so much. And that either way, you are in good company. Something else I want to be clear on is we're not just looking to like totally eradicate these mistakes forever and then it'll be perfect. Like there is no such thing as perfection or arrival in the reading life. The goal is not to ruthlessly eliminate everything we're doing wrong, but our goal is to cultivate awareness and to begin to formulate a plan that feels right for what to do next. This little bit of intention, and if you got the 2021 reading challenge, we're all about intention in our reading lives this year. It really goes a long way in cultivating a vibrant reading life that works for you. And that's really what we're about, to help you see what you need and what's getting in the way of that. Okay. So frequently when I'm making these mistakes, it looks like this. I stand in front of my shelves, staring at all the titles that I kind of maybe sort of want to read one day, but I have no idea what to read next. I can find myself reading a lot of books, like a lot of books, but just not reading many that are truly great, where I truly go like, oh, that was a wonderful reading experience. Um, I hear from a lot of readers who feel really self conscious and embarrassed that they don't read as many books as they think other people are reading or they think they should be reading. I talk to readers who read plenty, but they forget what it is or why they even picked it up in the first place. Finally, we can read a book and love it and just want to talk about it with somebody else and not have anybody to do that. And like, none of those things feel great. Okay. We really want this to be your best reading year ever. Um, and the first step is to figure out what's coming between you and that. Like what's in the way of your great reading life. So now we're launching into the pitfalls of the reading life. And number one is letting numbers drive your choices. It is obviously okay to set a goal for the number of books you want to read in a year. I talk to so many readers who read 4 books a year and they want to read 12. Like that is a great goal. And certainly if you want to read more, like I can give you strategies to help you do that. If that's truly what you need. But what we're talking about here is when the number becomes the most important thing. Um, Quantity is not better than quality. Y'all, I read more books in 2020 than I ever have before. I talked about this a little bit on the blog and I do it on the podcast. There's an Ask Anne Anything episode coming out next week on Tuesday, January 12th. It's called Ask Anne Anything, so it'll be easy to find. But I read 300 books and that felt like too many. And I wasn't reading them to read them. I was reading them because I was a little overwhelmed in 2020, and reading has always been my favorite coping strategy for dealing with life. Um, but I've always believed that quality is more important than quantity, but that really underscored it when I did get my best year ever, only if you're looking at the numbers. Something I see happening when people are focused on the number is that you read just to finish a book, not to enjoy it. And it leads to other mistakes in the reading life, like we'll get to at the end. Like if you want the numbers to really add up, then you don't take time to talk and discuss and reflect or even jot down favorite quotes in your journal because you could be reading instead. And I mean, I wrote a book called I'd Rather Be Reading. Believe me, I know the inclination to think I'd rather be reading right now, but we don't want you to do it at that cost. It's too high. And we don't want you to overlook quality in favor of like skimming the books and not enjoying the good stuff or picking up shorter books when really you've had that long one you want to read forever. I want to add a caveat here. Can quantity lead to quality? Yes, it can. Like if one in every 10 books is truly fantastic and you read 300, then maybe you're going to read more great books than you would if you read 100 books. But are there better ways to get more out of your reading and to read more great books? Yes. I think the quantity leading to quality thing is also in my head because I'm a writer. Like that's something writers are told all the time. Write enough bad words and eventually they'll get better. It is much harder to read a lot of bad books to find your way to good ones. Okay, next. Oops. Oh no. Sorry. I'm a little, here, let me do this a different way. I have my iMac trackpad and it's very sensitive. Okay, next one, getting stuck in the echo room of reading recommendations, that is. Oh, I mean, really, what I could say is Instagram and keep going because I know that's the place that trips so many people up. Um, Here's what happens when we're not sure where to turn for book recommendations. We often turn to the same places over and over. And Bookstagram is great. We get a lot of questions about where is this Bookstagram app and what is it? When you hear people say Bookstagram, they just mean people talking about books on Instagram. It's also a hashtag. I love Bookstagram. I mean, people are talking about books. That's what I love. Um, but sometimes when you're on a social media app, you can find yourself coming across the same 5 books over and over. And there are reasons for that. Often a reason is publishers just sent out 300 review copies to bookstagrammers and said, you can have this for free if you post it. So yeah, you are seeing the same 5 books over and over a lot of the time. And yes, it feels like an echo room because not only do we each get to choose who to follow in the first place, but after that, it's the algorithm that determines what you actually see. And when we're in this place, it's so easy to think, oh, hey, everybody's talking about that. I should read that. I'm seeing that everywhere without stopping to think, is it really the right book for me? Is it the right book for me right now? Or is it simply being put in front of your face all the time? I really believe that sometimes the universe is giving me a sign and is dropping a book in my lap, but sometimes it's the algorithm, and those are not the same thing. And I do want to say that the buzziest books on like the New York Times bestseller list or somebody's book club can be tempting. But then what can happen to me is I feel like I get stuck reading the same types of books over and over again. They're usually brand new with big marketing budgets. And that leads to me not branching out in genre or not reading backlist books, those older titles that I know that I will enjoy. Backlist books, those older titles that I know that I will enjoy. So we have a little poll for you thus far. Okay. Are these things that you have found have tripped you up in the past? Focus too much on the numbers, experience the echo room. Tell us what you think, and we will take a peek at the results in just a second. I'll give you 60 total seconds to do this. I haven't set a numbers goal for 2020. In fact, I never set numbers goal. I didn't even number the books in my reading journal until about 2 years ago. I've always thought you shouldn't game the system. You should track what you're reading and then let that tell you what you're reading, not like be a number to shoot for. But after reading 300 books, I definitely have in mind how many I don't want to read. I haven't arrived in a number yet, but oh, the echo room. It's hard. I found myself the past month because of that, just not logging on to Instagram. If I've been slow to respond to an Instagram comment, that's why I don't want to get distracted from my priority TBR. Okay, here's what this looks like. Oh, this is kind of the opposite of what I expected. So 55% of you said, yes, I have been drawn into the numbers focus. And 72% said, I've experienced the echo room. Okay, thank you for that. Next, mistake number 3 is the wandering eye. Oh my goodness. Again, it is a professional and personality hazard. I am an Enneagram 9. I'm an INFP. That means I love options and possibilities. And of course, the reading life is no exception because what kind of possibilities are better than bookish possibilities? Um, I tend to get distracted by the countless piles of books in my house. It's a natural hazard of the job. But when I'm feeling too scattered and distracted by shiny new books, because it's always, I mean, today's a Tuesday. There are lots of good books coming out today. And later I'm going to pop on Instagram and show you a couple of them that I really enjoyed. And maybe you will too. And what happens is we can get paralyzed in choosing what to read next or second guess the choice we already made about the next few titles we think we want to pick up. Sometimes this can even lead to a reading slump, and we don't want you to get in a reading slump. Those are the worst. Something I've learned is these distractions take hold when I forget why I'm reading and why I have chosen for my own reading life to read or buy or select or pencil in on my priority TBR the books I already have. Um, we're not having like a 7-step here's how to counteract that today, but I'm working on some of the strategies to counteract these throughout, and that is a big one. Like, why are you reading? That's what really can counteract the wandering eye. Something else that really helps for me is the priority TBR that I talked about yesterday. There's a video on Instagram that you can watch. You don't need to have an Instagram account to watch it. It's at instagram.com/what should I read next. But I do talk about my priority TBR and how that gives me a default 5 books to read next that just helps me ask myself this thing that I'm seeing on Instagram that's shiny and new, or this thing I'm noticing on the new release table at the bookstore. Is it more important to me to read right now than the 5 books I've already chosen? If the answer is yes, I will unhesitatingly swap. But that step just gives me a beat between my impulse to pick up a book that sounds good, because that's what I always want to do, and the reality of, is it the right book for me right now based on what I know I need? Um, We'll share other tricks for staying focused on your reading life, and we'll also be talking all about that in book club this season. Speaking of priorities, this leads to our next mistake: reading based on someone else's priorities. As we share our reading goals for 2021, it can be tempting to play the comparison game or to think like, oh, hey, that sounds fun when you see somebody else setting their goals or making their lists, without stopping to think about which goals will actually work with our real lives. For example, a friend announced last year that she was setting a goal for pages read instead of number of books read. And I thought, oh, that is so smart. Like that lets you track a number without like, I still haven't read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, a book I've been meaning to read for a very long time. And I know one of the reasons is it's like 800 pages. I could read 3 shorter novels in that time period, maybe even 4. So I love the idea. And I wrote that, like, let's track the pages read into my reading journal, only to discover that keeping track of page numbers wasn't fun for me at all. It felt like work. I didn't want to do the math. I just didn't care enough about the data. And then I felt bad that I wasn't doing it until I decided officially, like, I'm just not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to feel guilty about it. This is not data that I need. We may hear about someone else's cool project. Like, we featured these people on the podcast who have these cool projects, like to read a book published every year of the century, or a book from every country, or to read lots and lots of new releases. And that may be right for them, but that doesn't mean it's right for us. And this mistake of reading based on someone else's priorities can be as simple and sneaky as me rearranging that priority TBR because someone else was really excited about a book, or someone else was really excited about me reading a book. And so I throw out my own plans so I could read that book next. I have certainly done that. I've done that way too often. I hope you can take reading inspiration from others. In fact, I would urge you to do so. We're going to talk about the importance of that. But there is a difference between drawing inspiration from someone's reading life and adopting someone else's goals as your own. And I've done this consciously, and I've also done it unconsciously. But now that I know that, I mean, again, who speaks the Enneagram, Enneagram type 9, it's very easy for me to take on someone else's priorities as my own. And recognizing that that's an inclination I have in the reading life, it's like that caution tape on the edge of the highway. I just keep my eye on it and stay on the road. Okay. Next, we have comparing your reading life to someone else's. This comparison trap is so easy to fall into in any area of life. I mean, work, parenting, friendships, social media, and the reading life is no exception. So if you struggle with this, you are not alone. Although it is worth mentioning that some personalities are more prone to this pitfall than others. Some of you are like, Anne, what are you talking about? And some of you are like, oh my gosh, every day. Both are totally normal. I think the every day is more normal though. It is way too easy to look at someone else's reading log, and y'all, social media can be a real guilt and shame driver here. Um, and wish like, oh, I wish I could read more books, or I wish I could get so many new releases. My library doesn't have them. I can't afford them. You could see that somebody else has a lot more 5-star reads than you, that they seem to read a genre that you always wanted to, but just don't get or care about at this point in time. Um, we could also talk about other comparisons that are book related that are easy to make, like beautiful book journals or access to lots and lots of advanced review copies that you can't manage to get your hands on. Um, this can be really the most discouraging mistake of all, because comparison not only makes us feel bad, it also it prevents us from seeing our own reading tastes and habits with clear eyes, which I hope you're gathering. Seeing how we're reading, why we're reading with really clear eyes is crucial to creating a reading life that brings you great joy, that really works for you. In talking to other readers, I find we're especially vulnerable to comparison and even envy when we are unsatisfied with where our own reading life is right now, or when we are unclear about our own priorities. When you're clear on what you want from your reading life, it's a million times easier either to admire and celebrate other readers' experiences without feeling jealous about it. You can appreciate what they're doing and keep doing what you're doing too with no apologies. We've got two more mistakes to get into. Next is reading in isolation. This is mistake number 6, and I mean it two different ways. This can apply to the books you're reading on your own or to your reading life itself. Um, First, if you've never turned to a bookseller or librarian or a fellow reader, if you have a best friend that you never talk about books with, but who reads a book a year, if you've never turned to someone else for a book recommendation, but are only getting them from your usual sources, you are missing out. And I have to say that for much of my life, reading was a solo activity. Like I'd pick new books based on the cover catching my eye, or because it was on the news shelf at the library or bookstore, or because I saw it in a magazine. And reading, like me and my eyes and the book in my hand, or me and my ears and the audio, is still my introvert coping mechanism of choice. But I'm no longer exclusively relying on myself to pick out what to read next. And that is such a joy. I have bookish friends and podcast guests and book club members who share recommendations with me all the time. And now I wouldn't have it any other way. If you feel isolated in your reading life or in need of bookish conversation, like have you ever finished a book and gone, oh my gosh, I have to talk to someone about this? Find your people, find a great community of reading friends. And the other way is that your reading life itself can really use some reading people, not just some like fresh, you don't really say fresh blood about books, not just some fresh titles, but also the people that get to share that reading experience to you can really bring more to every book you read and also just more joy to your life itself. Okay. Reading mistake number 7, crowding out space for reflection. When we did a survey of our Modern Mrs. Darcy Book Club members recently, this was one of the very top, this was one of the top 2 things they shared. It might actually have been first. Speeding ahead without pausing to reflect. To move forward, you have to know where you've been. I feel like there's some kind of history proverb in there somewhere. This also applies in 2 ways. One, I wish I'd kept a reading log of every book I've ever read from the time I was reading The Babysitter's Club in 3rd grade. I would love to see that right now and to track my development through my high school and college and early 20s. And alas, I can't remember a bunch of the titles I loved or a bunch of the ones that were very forgettable, because that's what that means. But I do have lists upon lists of books I've read over the last several years. I really love my reading log because it encourages me to slow down and reflect on what I just read and think about, is this going to be a favorite book of the year? Is this something I might still be wanting to recommend in 5? Will I remember it in 5 years? Did it remind me of other stories? Is there a friend I know who would love this book? And that's because over the years, that reflection, those asking myself either very real or hypothetical questions, has helped me figure out my reading taste and even decide what to read next. And pausing in between books means that I remember what I read instead of forgetting it and moving on. Um, but also, in order to figure out which mistakes I'm making in my reading life and what I may enjoy reading next and what I want from my reading life, I also need to reflect on my reading life as a whole. Intentional time to think about what I'm reading, how I feel about my book choices, and how my reading habits are working for me. That helps me see the pitfalls and successes of my reading life over time. Finally, when you read a good book and set it down and think, ooh, what should I read next? On to the next. You can miss out on the conversation you can have with the book itself. Just not allowing yourself time to think about the book, to write up a few notes, or even a casual review that you may or may not share, to go on a walk and just think, why did that character do what they did? I mean, I like to say that a good reading experience has a before, a during, and an after. When you're looking forward to a good book, there is that sense of anticipation, like, oh, I can't wait for the next Jocelyn Jackson novel to come out. I wonder what's going to happen next. But also those questions at the end, like, what was the author trying to say? Did I think that person made the right choice? Was it the only choice they could have made? Why did the author make that choice? How does this relate to my own life? That's what makes the reading experience rich. And that's why, even though reading is entertainment, and sometimes something we have to do, it's a way to pass the time, it's a way to connect with others. But if we don't give it time to simmer a little bit and connect with the books, we're missing out on so many of not just the benefits, because I think that makes reading sound like broccoli, but really the true goodness that makes it how we want to spend our time. I don't mean to get all soapboxy on you. I have big feelings about that, as you can probably tell. All right. Do these sound familiar? Have you gotten stuck in readerly isolation? Have you moved on to the next without pausing to reflect? And I already told you that was one of the top two things we heard from our book clubbers when we asked them, I think just at the end of the year, what do you know your reading life needs? And that was a really big one. Y'all, I have to say again, because I love to read, because I'm surrounded by great books, and because it's fun. It's fun to pick up a new book. It really is. And it should be that not pausing to reflect, that can be really big for me. And something that I'm really genuinely proud of myself for doing in the past month is I've read a couple nonfiction books specifically that have made me want to just write and write in my journal just to mark the quotes and draw connections to other books. And I stopped and I did it when I don't always. I even used the bookmark feature on my audiobooks so that I could transcribe the quotes I wanted to. And it feels nice. It feels nice. Oh, see, it's not just me. 84% of you said I'm not pausing to reflect. And 46% of you said I've gotten stuck in readerly isolation. Okay, so why are we talking about these mistakes? In many ways, the diagnosis is its own kind of cure. Sometimes it's like turning on the light in the room. All of a sudden you can see and you're not going to bang your hip on the table. Sometimes it's the important first step to move forward, like realizing, oh, I am feeling kind of isolated in my reading life, can kick off the search for a more intentional readerly community. So, knowing that I'm prone, for example, to being distracted by shiny new reads is the first step in crafting a reading life to avoid that pitfall. Um, Also, so many times we don't avoid these pitfalls by like tackling them head on, like, I'm going to go fix this. And that's because often these mistakes that we inadvertently make, they aren't. They aren't something that you can just fix. It's because they're a symptom of something not being right in our reading life. And I've mentioned this a few times today that something is usually that we don't know what we want and we don't know why we're reading. And y'all, it is actually not easy to sit down and figure out, well, what do I want? I mean, some of us could name it if asked. Some of you have been through our 2021 reading challenge exercises. You've reflected on this, but just saying, what do you want from your reading life? You may not have an answer to that. Like, that can be a question worthy of like longer term exploration, not the work of a minute. Or it can be both. You may have a good idea right now. Um, some of the things you want. Like, I just recorded an episode of What Should I Read Next with a guest, got an awesome Alabama accent. And I always ask, what do you want more of in your reading life? And he said, I don't know what I want like for the big picture, for the long term, but right now I know I want 3 of these specific genres. Actually, what he said was, I want to push the boundaries. And I thought, ooh, what boundaries are we pushing? And then he said, like, I never read nonfiction. Just I don't, except for this one thing. So I want to read that. And I want to read, what else did he say? He wanted to read YA and lots of coming of age. And he said, some of this is in my sweet spot and some of this just is not. So I never pick it up because I don't know I'm not familiar with that corner of the bookstore. I never go to that section in the library and it feels really uncomfortable to me. So he doesn't know what his long term goals are, but he definitely has a next step in mind. And I could help with that. And it was fun. And that episode will be up later. All right. Now, Ginger is going to come back on and we're going to talk a little bit more about answering your questions. And also, if you would like some friendly guidance as you reflect on your reading life, we do have that 2021 reading challenge. It's a free 6-page downloadable worksheet where you just work through the packet. And we do give you some reflection prompts to help you think through, what do you want? Like, what is your vision? What do you intend? Do you want it to be fun? Do you want to read for learning? Do you want to read for escape? And if you do want some hand holding on working through these things, or if you do need a community of readers, we would love to invite you to be part of our avid community of readers in the Modern Mrs. Darcy Book Club. That is the format in which we usually have events like this. And what we're doing this winter with our January and February classes, we do classes regularly, is we are taking a closer look at our reading lives. We have 4 classes that focus on guided reflection, setting intentions, streamlining our TBR list, that's to be read, the books we want to read, and a ton of tips for cultivating a reading life that works for you. We're using a closet metaphor. We all know what it means to clean out the closet, right? Like we think about what looks good on us, we throw on the lights, we take out the stuff that doesn't fit, we think about what look we want to have, we make sure like that the belts aren't all frayed through. Not that I've worn a belt in 10 months at this point, but we get how you clean out the clutter and take out the old and make room for the new. That's how we're thinking about our reading life refreshing right now. Because sometimes, you know, your reading life gets, you keep pulling out the same gray sweater because it used to be so comfortable. And then one day you realize, you know, this just doesn't fit the way it used to. And it's time to try something new. Sometimes you need a whole new style. So we are intentionally thinking about what you want for your reading life, what you want to get out of it, and then how to get there. And we say that we're going to help you like declutter your TBR. We don't just mean take titles off your list. We mean to help you get clear on why are you reading and how does that practically connect to the books that catch your eye on Instagram or at the bookstore and those that don't. How can we help you feel really confident about building the reading life you want so that you can draw inspiration from others without feeling envious or distracted? Y'all, this gets easier with time as you see different aspects of yourself in your reading life and as you get more acquainted with yourself in this area of your life. But it's still never easy. And it's always easier in community when you can bounce ideas off other readers and talk to people who have been down that path. Um, we'll take a look in a second. Actually, Ginger, can you queue up to show us some of the previous events that we did in book club? And I'm going to turn to these. Wow, you all asked a lot of questions. Natalie says, how do you balance the reviewing of books for publishers and authors and also reading books you want to read, books that have been on your physical to be read shelf for a long time? That's a great question. And we're taking note of the questions you're asking today, and we'll make sure to build that into some of our later content. Natalie, the thing that's most important, and Natalie was a podcast guest. I was thinking of you this morning because the podcast guest who wants to read more nonfiction to push his boundaries, he's a runner as well. The right mix for my reading life is really important. I like to balance the old and the new, the obligatory with the whims. And I don't ever sit down and be like, this is the month to read backlist, because that's not how my reading life works. But there's never going to be a month where I don't read backlist. I do like to vary the genres and the publication date a lot. That variety is really important to me. Okay. Oh, Danelle says, I have some books I would love to reread, but find it difficult to justify rereading when I have so many unread books. And I'm not sure how to get to a place where rereading is okay. Any advice? Danelle. I'm an avid rereader. I know that some people, I think the minority of people, at least the minority of people I talk to on Modern Mrs. Darcy and What Should I Read Next are rereaders. But there is a strong but mighty contingent that says, nope, you already read that book. And if you read it again, that's one fewer book you will read before you die. But the question is, what do you want from your reading life? Like, I am very clear about why I reread and what kind of rereads bring me joy. And so I feel like I can unapologetically do that because I know picking up that book aligns 100% with what I want from that reading experience. I love to reread books personally. Again, this is for me. I love books that are told in interesting ways, that have interesting structures, and that I suspect are written with a keen eye to structure and to craft. So the books I love to reread are I've come to This Must Be the Place by Maggie O'Farrell like half a dozen times in probably just 3 years, or an embarrassingly small number. Not embarrassing, but one that I feel like you have to explain to people. And that's because the story, in my mind, I could recount it to you linearly, but she bounces back and forth within a century. She uses a bunch of different mediums. She tells it in letters and journalistic interview transcripts, and there's an auction catalog, and there's first person and third person, and there's a meeting on a mountain with a stranger. And it's fascinating to me to go through the story and see how she chose to lay out her story in a completely unlinear way and to see the effect she got. I reread for structure. I find that maybe this is the writer in me, but I can appreciate the craft of a book once I know what's already happened. Now, some reviewers and students will shortcut that process by reading all the spoilers so that they're never being surprised. They can read the book from beginning to end the first time, knowing what's already happened, like they would have gotten on their first read. But I'd much rather let the book surprise me once and then dig beneath the surface the second time. I hope that helps. I could talk about that all day. Um, but I won't. Also, there's a blog post on Modern Mrs. Darcy that is 10 books I love to reread and why. And it does give the titles that may or may not be right for you. But I do talk more about why I reread. And there's some great comments there that where other readers share why they reread. Okay. Oh, Jennifer says, when you're writing a book, how many books do you read on the side? I never read anything like the book I'm writing when I'm writing it. So, for example, when I was writing Don't Overthink It, I didn't read that, like, let me tell you how to live your life. Let me tell you how to make decisions. I didn't read any of that while I was reading. That was research before. And I read um, everything like it was my job during, except for that genre. And when I was writing, I'd rather be reading. I didn't read I didn't read much in the way of essays, but I didn't read any books about books while I was writing that book because that was the genre of the book. And I don't want the voice to come into that. But I'm always reading all the time. I write during the day and I read at night. So those things usually don't conflict. Okay, Sasha says, could I do a class where I show you my book journal? I finally want to start one and tips would be great regarding how to organize, including quotes and creating insights, etc. Sasha, we have already done, do we just have one or do we have two, Ginger? Okay. Actually, you know
Two.
what? Let's time out and you can show us the site right now.
Let's do it. Yes. This is really fun because you'll get a little bit of an example of what we do. So these are just a few of the classes. All About Emma was a blast. This is our resident English professor, is what we call our Chelsea, and she taught us all about Jane Austen's Emma. Audiobooks, I saw some of you talking in the chat. A zillion ways to get your hands on books. This was smack in the middle of COVID times where a lot of us were really leaning heavily on digital, but there was a lot of great ways. My favorite, why and how to write in your books. I'm a big fan of writing in your books. This will tell you why. See, here we go, some book journaling. If you are loving this class today about 7 mistakes, this is a great one to follow up with. 7 ways to get more out of your reading life. A lot of these would be directly related to the mistakes that you've been made. Get more out of your library. Bookstagram. This is what Anne was talking about earlier. What is Bookstagram and how to get better at it? Reading personality. This one along with Anne's book. And more book journaling. See, we can't stop talking about the book journaling. So that's just a little smattering. You can see here we've got a whole library of previous events, but this is some of the classes that we've done.
Thank you. Thank you for showing that. Oh, lots of questions about how I read. Okay, these are good ones. Okay, Laura says, after I finish reading a book, how do I determine if I keep or get rid of it? I have a hard time getting rid of signed editions. I'm running out of room. Where do you get rid of books to? It's harder to get rid of books now because I donate a ton in the library and they're not taking donations, but I have been giving them to little free libraries. And the United Way in my town maintains 40 libraries in a part of the city that's a little further drive from me than where I usually go. So I just took a ton of books to the United Way and they distributed them. But there are always places in your community who would happily take books. I keep a book if I think I may want to read it again, refer to it again, or honestly photograph it for the blog. Although I used to keep everything I might ever want to photograph, and now I don't because I don't have space for that. But that's how I decide. Okay, Sherry says, can you tell Anne that winter mixed nuts recipe was amazing? LOL. Right. Okay. Rochelle says, what are some examples of what people want from their reading life? On my podcast, What Should I Read Next? I ask readers every week, what do you want to be different in your reading life? What do you want more of in your reading life? What's something you're looking for in your reading life right now? And the answers vary widely. Sometimes it's focus. Sometimes it's to learn things. Sometimes it's just fun, escape. Sometimes they want vicarious travel. Sometimes they want insight into another way of being. Sometimes they want to deep dive a specific topic. Sometimes they want encouragement and inspiration. Sometimes somebody told me last week that they wanted a reality check. You can want any number of things. I hope that's a good example of ways to get started. Okay, Cheryl says, I'm excited about my TBR, but once I have a pile, they can feel like a burden or have to that zaps the joy. Any suggestions to not feel overwhelmed? I mean, of course. Okay. This makes me think of a math trick a math teacher told me once for kids who hate math. When you have a math worksheet and it's freaking you out because all you can see is all the long division problems you have to do, you take yourself a giant post-it note and you cover up most of them so you can only see 3 at a time. And then you only have to see 3 problems. If you have a pile of books, just move the pile. Put it someplace else and put 2 books on your nightstand and let that feel like books you're looking forward to and not books you have to get through. But seriously, if the pile is what makes you feel like a burden, get rid of that pile. You can do it. What questions do I ask myself when making my priority TBR aside from what's overdue at the library? Y'all, we have a great episode of What Should I Read Next called When the Library Runs Your Reading Life. It's with an editor friend and mine named Carolyn McCready. I do try not to let the library totally run my life because it is just one source that's bringing books into my life. I ask myself, what are the 5 books I last read? Like I told you, my priority TBR holds 5 titles, but I'm always looking at what I'm reading now in context. So I want to know, what are the last 5 books I read? What does that mean I need to, if I value the balance, the mix, what does that mean I should be looking at next categorically? And then like, what obligations do I have coming up? We're talking to Louise Miller in a few weeks, so I'm going to be rereading. All I can think is The City Baker's Guide to Country Living, and that's her first book. The Late Bloomers Club. I'm going to be rereading The Late Bloomers Club, so that's fresh. Like I'm doing a book club with Jane Harper next week, so I'm going to reread The Dry, so we can talk about that book based on my recent experience and not my memory from the last time we talked to Jane Harper in 2017, I think, Ginger. So what do I need to read? What do I want to read? And how can I keep the balance feeling good? Okay, Elizabeth says, what reading journal do I use? Right now, I just have a blank Leuchtturm journal. I'm about to start a new one. I love it. I did create my own reading journal with a publisher that's coming out on September 2021. So that is coming. It has a lot of book lists in it too. Advice on balancing book club reads when you aren't interested in a title but still want to participate. Whitney, I'm going to assume this is a general question, not a modern Mrs. Darcy Book Club question, but I think my answer would still be the same. So many times I hear from readers in all contexts that the books they love the most are the ones they never would have picked up if they didn't get a nice nudge from a reader, a person, a friend, a book club, the universe. I would really ask why you don't want to give it a try. If the answer is I never read sci-fi, I would tell you to give that book a shot, because the best reading experiences are the ones that hold something that really surprise us. But if you know, like, oh, hey, that book starts with a tragic event that is too similar to my own life, and I don't want to go there right now, that would be a whole nother conversation. But if you think, that book's not for me, I would really encourage you to ask yourself why and perhaps take a chance on it. The more confidence you have in your book club or the readers in your book club, the more I would urge you to give that a try. Okay. Laura says, any tips on keeping track of why this is on my TBR? I tend to download tons of books and don't always know why it's there. Like, for example, was it wrecked by a friend in real life or BookBub or Instagram, etc.? Yes, it's just a tiny bit of work, but it is work. When I keep my to be read list, my written one in my journal, that you can do this on Goodreads as well, I write down when it was recommended to me, who recommended it to me, and why it sounded good to me. So, for example, Ginger told me to read 7 Brief Lessons on Physics by Carlo Rovelli. She told me to read it first a couple of years ago, but we were just talking about it recently. And then I intended to read it and I realized later that the book I was telling you about that was downloaded for Audible that I wanted to read right now, it wasn't the same Carlo Rovelli book. But I make silly mistakes too every day. But why I wrote it down. So, because she said it was fascinating and she thinks about it every day and has every day for 2 years. Like, yes, that got my attention. I know top of my to be read, actually, it was fun to look through my old to be read list the other day because I could see so many books that were once recommended that I ended up really enjoying, but I couldn't have told you why. Like Max Lemoyne on the podcast told me to read A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki because the structure was brilliant. Well, now I knew who to thank for recommending that book to me. And yeah, it did have an incredible structure. No wonder I enjoyed it so much. Okay, Ginger, I'm going to help ask you to help me prioritize our final questions that we need to answer and see if there's anything else we need to show people.
That's a great point. Oh, so many things. I know my brain is racing, and I wrote down some notes too for myself. Sometimes you have one problem, but you realize that there's several reasons for that. So just asking yourself
Mhm.
what those reasons are. Let's see here. I really liked Martha's question about what do you think about reading 3 to 4 books at a time? Multitasking, is that bad or okay? Because I think, again, it goes back to the why. Why are you reading more than one book at a time? It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I talk about this in more detail in the Ask Ann Anything episode coming up next week. I do read more than one book at once. Part of that is just convenience. I'll have a book on my Kindle or the Kindle app on my phone because then you're never stuck at a train without a book handy. I don't really advocate reading while driving, but if you're like way back and the train is going by in your neighborhood, then yes, and absolutely. But I like to read fiction before bed, nonfiction during the day, and I like to have an audiobook going. So I often have 3 or 4 books going at once. I don't have 2 print novels going at once. I find that confusing. But if the format is different, like audiobook book versus print or print versus ebook, I can keep everything straight. Something that I especially like about this for myself and also for some reading personality types is that that means that I'm never stuck with no book to read. When people who don't automatically need to read like some readers always read between 9 and 10 p.m., the end, they're going to find something to read. They will read the back of the shampoo bottle if they don't have a book handy. Um, but some readers will read if they're in the middle of something good and won't read if they're not. And if you do have several books going at once, you're never going to finish them all at the same time. So you'll always be in the middle of what is hopefully a good book. Ginger, could we show people what else we have in book club just besides the past events? Um, for because we've gotten a lot of questions that I know that like we've answered in past classes, or you're asking for like how can I really clean out my to be read list with intention and get clear on my priorities. And we're going to be talking about that in our classes. But these classes are just one portion of what we do in book club. But we did want to have you here on Zoom so you can see this is what it feels like. You can be eating lunch at home or drinking your coffee or wine and chatting with people in the chat and then on our site, in your own way, in your own space, safely distance, which is so important this year, but still enjoy the book talk and the camaraderie of people who love to read books. Like I know that we have a lot of people here who feel like they don't have people who love reading like they do in their real life, or who can't get to those people right now. And just like we are today, we record every single event with the exception of our small group member meetups that we have occasionally, where there are 6 people in a room and we make sure in advance that you will not show up without knowing that, yes, your face will be on screen. And we have come. Ginger and I have come to book club in sweats before with no makeup because we feel like it's important to model that you can come as you are. But sometimes we put on lipstick and it's nice to have a reason to do that too. But so we say the book club is for community classes and conversation. There's a group of avid readers who love books as much as you do. We also have these classes we had book school in the fall where we dug into reading with a literary lens, which we called excessively nerdy and also accessibly nerdy, like accessible. We talk to authors all the time as well, which is a really fun part of book club. I feel like you don't appreciate how fascinating an author talk can be until you come to one for the first time. So I hope you'll give that a try so you can see what it's like. And then we share extra stuff like printables, bookmarks, surprise announcements, and seasonal reading guides and unboxings. I think the summer reading guide, the expanded digital PDF magazine we do, and the unboxing where we reveal all the books in a 90-minute event. Those are some of our most popular. That might be our most popular event. And book clubbers get that first. And they get it. They get the fun insidery stuff too. Okay. Oh, can you show us that stuff on the screen, please?
Yes, let me do that. And in fact, this actually answers a few of the questions. So I'm going to
Oh,
sort of
good, good, good.
answer as I go a few of these questions that I spotted. Let me share the screen and I'll show you where these can be found. And then, a couple of tips. I can't cover an hour's worth of tips like we would give in a class, but Ellen asked, how do you figure out whether to read an audiobook or how to read a book on paper or an
Mhm.
audiobook. And so that would be something that we would answer in something like the audiobook. The answer is, prioritize if it's a really, really excellent experience. And so we talk about some books that are really, really good. You'll see Shannon, who's a new convert to audiobooks. let me show you what Anne was just talking about, which was book school. We had original book school, and then we just had our back to book school more recently. So again, some tips for actually solving some of these. So why you would track your reading. This could appeal to those of you that need to be more reflective. I'm pointing the finger at me. Um, Someone else asked, how do you tackle books that are harder? Maybe you want to read them big picture, but they're not that exciting. I actually answer that question how I do that with TBR. Conquer Your TBR, Blocks and Zones Are Your Friends. I think I've admitted before that I'm reading a book with my mom this year, 3 pages at a time. So just some things like that are ways to get a little bit more out of that. So again, we've got author chats. Oh my goodness, I have to go here because you guys know where I'm going if you've been around for a bit. I have to show you all these good authors. Elizabeth Acevedo, we talked to her, such a gem. Natalie Jenner. This is just from the past year. Julie Robson brought props, you guys. I can't. It was so good. And then someone else asked, how do I find bookish people? And so none of these things are things that you can only do in a book club, but it's something that when you've got a crowdsource of lots and lots of bookish people, you might find them here. So I just wanted to show you a few of the resources that some of those were directly answered questions that you guys are asking. How do I find this? How do I find this? Again, it's not that you have to be part of a book club in person or online, but it sure has helped. I know I'm a better reader because of the book club and the books we've loved together, the books we've hated together. Hate might be a strong word. I know that makes some of us in the room uncomfortable, but the ones that we've disliked together make for really interesting conversations. So
And I am realizing from your questions that I just didn't tell you something that Ginger and I both know too well, I think. Book Club is a monthly membership. And so everything we just showed you on the previous events, the book club chats, the classes that we have and access to all past classes, that is included with your monthly membership. And we have monthly, quarterly, and annual memberships. So whatever works best for your schedule, your obligations, and your budget, we want that to be available to you. Like I know that we have a ton of teachers and also students in our community who join us for the summer and are real busy grading papers in October. Also, we vary our times. Like we often have times around lunchtime, Eastern Central US time, and early evening Eastern Central US time. But we vary those purposefully just because we want to hit as many people live as possible for some of the events, because we do have people in Australia and the UK and India and Italy and the Czech Republic, and Ginger's in Hawaii, and I'm on the East Coast time zone of the United States. And we want everybody to be able to come live at some point. When you come live, you get to ask the authors questions live that you think of during the event. And you get to hear what we're saying in a class like this and say like, oh, would you talk more about that? That's the advantage of coming live. But we record every single thing except when our members are on camera. So that means we record 95% of our events and they're available as long as you remember to watch at any time. So I hope that's helpful to know. And sorry that we forgot to tell you sooner. We have people who have been with us. We have a significant number of people who've been with us since summer 2016, and we have people who joined us this morning. So whatever, you will be in good company no matter what. And Ginger, let's tell people what's coming up in book club. Can you drop that link in the calendar? And let me just tell you, the calendar has all our events. We do add events all the time, but these are the classes we have coming up. On Thursday, January 7th, y'all, we're getting right to it. We timed today's event to launch right into our winter season. That that session is called Take the Temperature of Your Reading Life. We talked about how to know where you want to go, first you got to figure out where you've been. And that is what that session is about. Now, if you did our little worksheet on the reading challenge, just the 2 pages to guide you through, like, what do you want from your reading life this year? This class will be the extended version with some additional reflection about that. Thursday, January 14th, that's an evening class, is Set Your Reading Intentions. What do you want from your reading life and why? So you can figure out how you want to get there. Thursday, January 28th, we have our live discussion with author Louise Miller about the Late Bloomers Club. Our December, January, and February reads are all cozy. cozy books in one way or another. And our January selections are fresh starts and new beginnings. We're reading the Late Bloomers Club, and we're pairing that with Evie Drake Starts Over by Linda Holmes. Tuesday, February 2nd, create your no, Tuesday, February 2nd is our Clean Out Your Closet class. We're going to help you clean out your bookshelf, digital and or physical and metaphorical, to figure out like what belongs in your reading life and what doesn't. So like practically, you figured out these things. What does it mean moving forward? And then later that month, we're having a class, Create Your Capsule Bookshelf. Yes, we are totally playing on Create Your Capsule Wardrobe. And the idea is it's almost like creating a priority TBR, but not a list of specific titles, but a specific vision and plan. If this is what I want and this is what I need, how do I move forward? It's going to be fun. I'm really excited about it. We created all these classes in response to what we hear our readers saying they need. And if you like this kind of thing, then I think you are going to find it really helpful and also fun, because that's what I love about learning about books and reading. It can be really helpful and revolutionize your reading life. But 2020 was really hard in a lot of ways. I'm glad I had my books and my book people there with me.
That's right. I was going to say, I'm glad you said accessibly nerdy, because I think that's my favorite term we've ever coined.
If the shoe fits. So readers, thank you so much for joining us today. We will email out the notes and the replay, whether or not you could be here live. We're really glad that you could join us and that you're excited about learning more of your reading life. Ginger, we should probably share a link if you want to sign up right now. Because we would love to have you. Yes, those author events are only open to book club members. And if you liked the stay-at-home book tour events, we were able to do that because we've been holding author chats in book club since 2016. And we have the technology and the know-how and the contacts. And so it was really easy for us to do our part for the literary world and for readers everywhere when COVID shut down all the book tours, including mine, in March and April of this year. Yes, Jessica wants to know, can you get access for the winter reading guide if you sign up for book club today? Yes, we have those things available for our members on an evergreen basis. So yes, that is right there on the dashboard if you are joining us anew. And a ton of titles are coming out in January, February, and that winter reading the winter book preview also has team favorites in it. There's a lot of fun stuff there. Oh, and they can access the class we just did on the we had our whole team come on and share the books that we loved the most in 2020. It was such a fun event. We just did that. Was that last week?
It was just last week. It feels
We
like a lot
just did
longer.
that. It was so much fun. So that's available now too, and that will feel super timely. I know I didn't get to all your questions,
My
but
husband's
thank
reading
you for
one of
asking
those
them.
last night. He was talking to me about, he was like, so which team member
Yeah.
suggested this book that he's reading right now? So I had to fill him in. So
What's he reading?
He's reading the Wayfarer one that Brenna talked
Oh,
about.
that's the one I'm going to read next too. You all saw it on my priority TBR yesterday. Okay, so Brenna, influencing people. Oh, hi, Brenna. I didn't know you were here.
So fun.
What we try to do with book club is make the price accessible for the amount of content we share. Y'all, I have business people email me all the time and be like, Anne, the amount you're charging for what you're making is too low. But we know that reading is something that really brings a lot of people joy, even when the pocketbook is not flush. And this is something we can do, so we do, but something that we do to keep it easy on us is not to spend a lot of time and effort managing coupon codes and that specific kind of customer service. So I hope you understand why, and I hope that answers your question. And you can always try it for a month, and if you hate it, you can quit. And if it really doesn't work for you, email us and we will give you a guarantee. That is on the site as well. But yeah, there are no free trials because we would rather spend our energy making wonderful content instead of managing that kind of thing. I'm so happy he's reading Wayfarers. Thank you for sharing that with us. Brenna,
Well,
taking over the whole world. First it was Mira Grant, and now it's Wayfarers series. Ginger, I hope you're reading something good. I am 2/3 of the way through the new Jocelyn Jackson thriller coming out in April, which is going to be in the summer reading guide. I'll tell you right now, or I think it will. It starts with a baby snatching. I mean, that's going to be lots of triggering for a lot of people. But I Love her. So I'm almost through with that. And I have like 8 minutes left in another book on Audible. So that's happening real. No, it's on Libro. It's on Libro, actually.
Find some laundry to fold or something.
I'm sure
Surely.
something needs to be done around here.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm glad Becky Chambers is getting lots of love and comments. Yes, first she's taking over our team and then the world. Oh, what are you reading, Ginger?
Oh, I am just about to start Kitchens of the Great Midwest, which is our book for February. I have never read any of him. Oh, that's not true. He's the Logger King guy, right?
Yes. Yes, he
Okay,
is.
yes. So I did read that after our summer book retreat.
Mhm.
But yes, I'm also reading. I've never read Wind in the Willows, so that's kind of my nighttime book
Oh.
because it's a gentle way to go to
Mhm.
sleep. So very, very different. Those are two really different kind of books in my mind. Oh, and Michael Smith's Nick just came out today. Thanks for reminding me, Jennifer. That is on my purchase on the day of release list. So thanks for reminding me. That's out today.
Yeah. Well, I hope you enjoy it.
I think
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this class today. I hope you learned something about yourself and your reading life. We will email out the 7 mistakes in the email with the class replay, and we hope to see you real soon. Okay. Thank you very
happy
much,
reading.
Ginger.
Thank you.
Happy reading, everyone.